Here we're back.
Yay.
Right on time.
That's right.
It's literally impossible. I hate this more than anything in the world. I know people do it now just to get a rise out of me, but it makes me irrationally angry whenever people are like, "You're late," and it literally says, well, it doesn't show up there, but it says 8:50 p.m. on the comment. That's when it's scheduled for. That's what you get. Anyway, Noah, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
You're not, all home alone, are you anymore?
Not anymore. One of my roommates is back now.
Only one?
Yeah, one of my roommates is back. The other one got COVID. So they are coming back later.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god, everyone has COVID. It's ridiculous. You know the positivity rate for testing is like 35+%.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh geez. Yeah, it's going crazy these days.
I have to, because all right, here's Washington D.C. where I live, and let's see if I can find a list here. Does it have the positivity rate on here? Wow, that's kind of nuts. Over 2.7 million COVID tests have been administered in the District of Columbia, which, by the way, has a population of 700,000. So statistically, everyone has been tested like 5 times.
That's pretty impressive. I'm sure a couple of those were me as well.
Oh, didn't you remember when you were getting tested like twice a week last like February or March? You would like go like every 3 days to get tested.
That was fun. That was like my activity for the day.
Oh my goodness. Well, I suppose there are less healthy things that you could do every day. Oh my gosh, the positive. Okay, yeah. So the positive test rate for reference in November was 1.1%.
Okay.
December 5th or December 9th, 1 month ago, positivity test rate was 2.1%.
Okay.
Today, positivity test rate was 27.3%.
Oh my god.
In a month. So that means like there's dramatically more cases than we're seeing, because that just means that there is nowhere near enough testing if that many people. Oh my goodness. That's crazy. It's nuts right now, people. I mean, have you seen the chart? It's literally like a cliff face. It's nuts.
Geez. I didn't realize it was that bad because I've had like anecdotally, like some of my friends have gotten COVID, but I didn't, and I knew it was getting bad, but I didn't realize it was that bad.
I mean, we're about to crack 1 million cases a day.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's nuts. Ugh. Anyway, look at this. This is the most glowing review of our podcast I've ever heard, I think. Guy, only reason I watch this podcast is so I can sleep before work tomorrow. There you go.
You know what? If it's doing someone some good, then I'm happy.
If it's helping someone get to sleep, I guess we'll take that.
Yeah.
I guess we'll take that.
I'll take it.
Ugh. It's kind of nuts. Did you notice? I mean, you guys didn't I was about to ask if you guys got any snow. That's a ridiculous question. We had some nutty roads. If anyone's watching was on the East Coast, did anyone else have as wacky of a time with the snow this past like a week ago? I think it was almost exactly a week ago. It was like the night after we did the podcast last week is when we got a whole bunch of snow over here. And apparently a lot of the snowplow drivers had COVID, so they couldn't come in, so the streets didn't get plowed. And like, it was nuts. Did you hear about I-95?
Yeah, I was gonna say I read some story about some like Uber driver that was like driving. Do you see this like driving someone home and then they like some people were stuck on 95 for like 24 hours. So this Uber driver
Yep.
like got off and like got a hotel room for the person or something. I don't know, it's crazy.
Senator Tim Kaine, former vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine, was stuck on 395 for 27 hours.
That's just like awful. I can't even imagine.
I feel like if you're stuck on the highway, like it's crazy to think about being stuck on the highway for a day, 24 full hours on a highway.
Yeah.
And I think it makes you wonder. I think it's a sunk cost fallacy. Like if you're there, you're in a snowstorm, traffic comes to a halt. You obviously don't know exactly why. You don't know how long you're going to be there. You don't know if it's like someone stopped up ahead. It's just traffic. You're going to keep going. Maybe your car in particular isn't stuck. You're just gridlocked.
Right.
I feel like as you keep waiting, your inclination to keep waiting would build before like saying, screw this, I'm leaving. Because I feel like after 8 hours of waiting, you're thinking, all right, this is wrapping up. Stuck for 8 hours. People are going to come clear this off. I'm in the middle lane. If I leave my car, it's going to clear up right away. And then my car is going to be in the middle. It's going to get towed or something. I got to wait it out. But imagine, 19 hours deep into that. At what point, at what point would you, Noah, leave your car and just walk somewhere else?
I don't know, because like I also heard that I think like maybe people were trying to get off and then they were like even the side roads were closed too, so they were like kind of stuck. But like getting out and just walking. But like then you're abandoning your car. It's like what's gonna happen to it at that point? I don't know.
Right. I mean, I feel like if I were in the rightmost lane and I could put it on the shoulder, I would maybe walk, like see if there was something nearby that I could walk to.
Yeah.
I think that I would probably do that. But I guess you don't really know, like you're not going to, when you get stuck there, you're not going to say, all right, 27 hours to kill. Let me go to a hotel room. Because like you have no idea. It could be an hour, it could be 2, could be 3 days. You have no idea.
Yeah, that's true. And it's like, what did they like not run out of gas or like what happened with that? It must have been really cold too.
I think people were like rationing gas. Like they would turn their car on, heat it a little bit, turn it off. They'd like bundle up. Yeah. No, I stayed home that day. I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
We got a good 8 inches here in like downtown. Is there gonna be more? I swear to God, I'm done with snow. My car was a mess. I was gonna get a. No, your car's not a mess. Your car is.
Well,
brand
I'm done
new.
with snow, is what I meant to say.
Oh. Okay, good. There's no. Oh no! Snow showers on the 16th. I'm gonna KMS myself. Ugh, that's awful. Oh well. I'm just gonna not drive the next time it snows because I need to get a car wash and then I don't want it to get dirty again. So I'm just gonna not drive. That's my plan.
You should just get like a snowmobile or something.
In fact, I think speaking of cars and driving and stuff, Noah, I think we should take some time towards the end of the podcast to discuss automobile related things. I think that could be a little bit of fun because there's been a development on the Noah side of things that would be worth talking about.
That is true. Yeah, we'll definitely get to that.
So why don't we go ahead and start our audio recordings and we can go ahead and get started here, shall we?
All right, I'm ready.
Welcome to Drk Mode, the podcast that brings you sage advice from 2 technology experts. And that's not just what we call ourselves, it's what our moms tell people when the iPhone turns 15. I'm your host, Luke Miani.
And I'm your host, Noah Rubin. On this show, we take questions from listeners, attempt to answer them to varying degrees of success, and maybe even have a laugh or two along the way.
Ha ha ha. What a good intro there, Noah. That was really well done. Now, today
Thank
is a
you.
special day in the history of technology because 15 years ago today, to the exact date, Steve Jobs unveiled the original iPhone. And ooh, I'm not prepared. I was gonna be ready with my. I have a small collection
A
of
small
original
collection.
iPhones. Well, don't don't worry about it. But let me go get those. Let me go get those. I'll be right back.
I don't know if I'd exactly call Luke's selection small. Maybe among iPhone collectors, but I think he has quite a few of these things lying around. Oh, there it is.
Ah, hello. All right, I'm gonna shift this into this wide view. Now, yeah, okay. This is my box where I have been collecting um vintage Apple products, we'll call it. Now, my collection is not, comprehensive or really that expensive. I think okay, I will admit I did spend $700 on my like nicest iPhone 2G. But if you know anything, if you go on eBay, if you know anything about iPhone 2Gs, you know that the prices on those things get pretty crazy. And I'll explain it. I'll talk about it. I was even maybe considering making a video on this. So I don't know if people want to hear a little bit more about this at some point in the future. I'd be happy to go into some detail. But I've got a bunch of stuff here in my vintage Apple box. I've got, what do we have here? A bunch of iPhone 5s because I was able to find new in box iPhone 5s for surprisingly little money. Look at this. I just love seeing a beautiful slate, the best color, iPhone 5 in mint condition. I mean, it it's perfect. Can you believe, Noah, that this is almost a 10-year-old phone?
It still looks good. That was a good phone. I love that
This
phone.
thing was fantastic. If Apple made this exact phone, but with the Face ID like whole front look, I would probably buy it.
They're still using the iPhone 6 design, and that was only 2 years after the 5 design. And the 5 design looks more like the 13 and the 12. So yeah,
Well, I don't know the 13 I guess they did kind of they kind of admitted that the 5 design was right when they did the 13.
yeah.
They basically said, "Hey, whoops, we shouldn't gave up on that so soon." I mean, this is just an iPhone 4 on original iOS. I
I've
do
seen too
have
many of those.
another sealed iPod Touch 4th gen in here. This is 12 years old. What? Ridiculous. You'll like this one, Noah. I think you had one of these actually. Still in our original retail seal here.
Mm.
Look at that.
Oh yeah.
Second gen.
Yep, I had a second gen. Love that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Brand new. I paid $50 for this.
Really?
For a sealed hello. It's awesome.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah.
Okay, what is this? This is the one that I already unboxed. I'm getting to the iPhones. Don't worry. I got a bunch more iPhone 5s. There's an iPhone 5C on original iOS. That one's not like rare or anything. I just have it in here. But then we get to the iPhone 2Gs, and there are a few. There are a few. These four are my not fancy ones. None of these are particularly fancy. This is an 8 GB one that's actually pretty good condition. Look at that. Beautiful. This one is a 4 GB one. This one's a really original one, but not holding up too well. Doesn't really
Oh,
stay
man.
together. Yeah, this one's a little rough around the edges. And then I have another one that's an 8 GB. This one I think works pretty well, but this is a good example of like your typical iPhone 2G, and I'll explain what makes these different for collectors. I'm not super deep into the iPhone 2G collecting because it gets super expensive and these things actually are super unreliable. I suppose not the most surprising thing, but there's actually quite a big difference between that iPhone 2G and my two most valuable iPhone 2Gs, which are this one and this one. All right, what's the difference? Well, this is my personal favorite because what we have here, this is the 4 GB model. That's important. And if I pull it out here, this is the difference between a $700 iPhone 2G and a $70 iPhone 2G. Why is this one worth 10 times as much? Well, you can probably tell from the outside that this one is really nice. It has one scratch. So that's not bad. This one's a little scuffed up. These back plates get really, really easily scuffed. And typically that's not a problem because you can just replace it. However, what makes the iPhone 2G unique in many ways is that the serial number is engraved on the back case. So if you change it, they don't match and it's worthless. So that's why a good condition iPhone 2G is more valuable. With an iPhone 5, you can go buy you can reskin the thing and basically put it in a new body and refurbish it. You can't do that with the iPhone 2G. So to have one in good condition means it has to have been maintained for 15 years. Now, this one's also a 4 GB. The 4 GB model only lasted for about 3 or 4 months because when Apple launched it on June 29th, I think, maybe it was July. I don't know.
I think it was June.
Yeah, that sounds right. I think it was because that's when the iPhones used to be a mid-year thing before they moved to September.
Yeah.
But the 4 GB model only made it to like October of 2007 and they discontinued it. This particular one was made 1 week after the launch. So this is a really early one. And it's also running iPhone OS 1.0, which does not have a lot of functionality, folks. It's pretty bare bones. And it also is not charged. I do need to charge these more. I'm not a good collector because you're supposed to like every couple of months put some juice in the batteries to keep them from dying. And I need to do that more often. But the quirk with iPhone 2Gs is, especially on old versions of iPhone OS, if they die, usually you can't get them to charge over USB. You have to use FireWire for them to actually boot up and get a charge going. So I think I might actually use my titanium PowerBook. Did this thing have FireWire? Yes. Ha 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 ha. We're getting really retro today.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let me charge that. Oh. Did you hear that? I dropped it.
Oh, jeez.
It's okay. It was only about an inch. Didn't cause any damage.
It's titanium. It'll be fine.
No, the iPhone is what I dropped.
Oh.
The PowerBook is worthless. Nobody cares about these things for some reason. Aha, look at that. It's booting up right away, just like that. That's a little pro tip. If you get an iPhone 2G and it's dead, plug it into FireWire first.
That's a
You
good
can
tip.
probably score you can probably score a pretty good deal if you just keep that little tip in mind.
That's some good tech advice that we gave today.
We sure did, us technology experts.
That's right.
This is my other valuable iPhone 2G. This one is annoying me because this one has a bad display. Or like the display connector or something, because it has like random green pixels that are stuck on green. But this one is valuable because the serial number on the phone and the box match, and it's an original box. You can tell an original box because it doesn't have a fourth row of icons with iTunes down there. So those are the early ones, and those are worth more. So if I can get this phone repaired, which is extremely difficult to do, too difficult even for me to have attempted, that's how difficult it is, then this would be probably $1,000 phone. But I need to work up the nerve to do it. I have some donor iPhone 2Gs that would be up to the task, but I don't know if I'm up to the task.
That is a bit risky.
Okay, are we charging here? Yes. This is huge. It's kind of weird to be charging an iPhone with a PowerBook that is older than the iPhone.
Yeah.
And let's see if these things can actually hold a charge for a really long time. I'm kind of curious if any of these are actually holding a charge. Doesn't look like they are, which isn't super duper surprising. But sometimes they'll sit there for like 3 or 4 months and still hold a charge. Alas, these I've not been so lucky. Oh well. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about how much has changed since the original iPhone came out. I mean, Noah, you and I were 12.
Yeah.
Or no, not even. What am I saying? We were not 12. We were 9.
Yeah, it was like 8 or 9.
Yeah. Do you remember the launch? Do you remember that time period?
Not really. I'm trying to think of like 2007. I know my dad had a BlackBerry at the time.
Same.
And I'm trying to think oh no, that one's turning on. Nice. My dad had a BlackBerry at the time. My mom, I think this was either she had the Motorola Razer, which was one of the first Android phones, or if it was even before that, then she had the Palm Trio or something. It was like a PDA kind of thing. I don't remember what she had at the time.
My dad had one of those. I think my dad had the Palm Trio in 2007, and then a BlackBerry until the 4S came out.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy to think about how the dominance of smartphones. I mean, it's obviously Noah and I were young, and I'm sure many of you guys were young according to my audience demographics at the time. But so much changed so quickly with the iPhone, and yet at the same time, I mean, I think we all kind of tend to glorify the original iPhone, but it was limited when it came out. I mean, the keynote presentation where they unveiled the iPhone, because remember, it was unveiled 15 years ago today on January 9th, but it didn't launch to the public until the end of June. So you'd think, I mean, nowadays you'd think, oh, well, it was mostly done. No, it really wasn't. I mean, the iPhones were janky in their prototype stages. They were actually so fragile, Noah, that the higher ups that were testing them at Apple, when the prototypes were manufactured in China, they couldn't ship them to California because they would like the bumping around in shipping, they would be broken on arrival.
Really?
So they would fly to the factory, pick them up in like a padded briefcase, fly them back first class with them to do testing. They literally hand delivered the prototypes because they were that fragile.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
And that was all going on right up until like the keynote. There were like 4 or 5 different phones wired up for the keynote. So if anything went wrong, they could switch really quickly. And the entire performance, and it was a performance. It was completely choreographed, not just scripted. Every button press, every like the amount of songs played. There's when Steve demonstrates the like music player capability, right? Because the whole thing was it's a new media device. It's a widescreen touch control. It's an internet device. Oh, it's all the same. Those were not correct. Those 3 things. I can't remember what they were. Oh yeah, music, phone, and internet. Thank you.
Yeah.
Comments. Yeah, it was music, it was phone, it was internet. When he was explaining the music, they played a couple seconds from a couple different songs. Those exact portions of the songs were choreographed because it was so buggy that the phone couldn't play through a song without crashing.
Oh.
Yeah. That's how janky it was 5-6 months before people went out to a store and bought them.
Yeah, I remember. I didn't know that it was pretty janky. I know that they had multiple devices, and I knew it was very coordinated. I did not know the thing about like flying them on the planes, and like I didn't know they were that like fragile. That's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of makes sense though. I mean, at that point, I think that was a really big turning point for Apple because if you go back to, I mean, I plugged it into a PowerBook, right? The PowerBook G4 Titanium. This was 2001. That's when this thing came out. So that's 6 years before the iPhone. But in those 6 years, Apple sort of realized that they could do a lot more than what they were doing. I mean, think back to when Steve Jobs rejoined Apple in 1998 and he said, all of this stuff that we're making is crap. We're starting from scratch. They had this huge, messy lineup. I bought this Macintosh Performa from 1995, a couple of years before Steve came back. That sadly was not working, so I never made a video on it. But dude, the thing came with a literal box full of bloatware, like bundled, advertised demo software. Not even sorted. I still have the box. It's literally just about 18 inches by 18 inches by 5 inches, and it's just full of advertisements.
Like a box of CDs?
Yes. Just
Yikes.
a jumbled, unsorted mess.
Yikes.
Yeah. Because that was what Apple's business model was before Steve came back and said, this is crap. We're starting over. That was the iconic 2x2 marketing grid. Desktop for consumers, desktop for pros, laptop for consumers, laptop for pros.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great. That saved Apple from financial ruination. But then they started to think like, hey, well, we're making all of these great computers that people connect stuff to. They connect their music devices. They rip their CDs. They connect their phones. Why don't we make the devices that they're connecting to the computers as well? And the iPhone, I think, was more decisive than the iPod in saying, hey, we don't have to be a computer company. We don't have to make the computers. We can make your entire ecosystem. That was why this was so special. It wasn't just, the modern incarnation of the smartphone. It was the reason that Apple is a $3 trillion company. This is when they figured out how to be not just a computer company, but an entire like comprehensive technology company.
That's definitely that's a good perspective because like the iPod was super. When was that? When did that first come out? Like 2001, 2003,
One.
somewhere around there. 2001. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was obviously had a head start, and that was a big thing. Like people that was like a huge phenomenon, and it
Yeah.
sparked other things, other media players and MP3 players and all that stuff. But like yeah, I mean at the end of the day, it was an accessory, and it was a big thing, a big cultural thing. It was big for Apple, obviously, but like I mean, I guess obviously, first off, you look today, iPhones are, huge in the smartphone market, and iPods are, basically dead at this point. But like the iPhone,
Yeah.
yeah, you're absolutely right about the $3 trillion company thing because the iPhone like was a big thing for Apple.
And I mean, think about it this way: the iPhone has now outlived the iPod. Because I think we could all realistically consider the iPod to be an irrelevant device. I mean, people still collect them, audiophiles still use them, collectors use them, what have you. But broadly speaking, people aren't going, "Ooh, the new iPod just dropped. Let me go cop the new iPod." People aren't scalping the new iPod.
And there
There
is no
isn't
new
even a new
iPod.
iPod.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's not exactly the product that people lust over. And people always think of the iPod as being Apple's like big hit. If you look at it, iPod sales peaked around 2009, 2010, had declined significantly 2012, 2013, and by 2014 were essentially gone. The iPhone has not had that. I mean, maybe it's not rising year over year, but the iPhone is, insane market share, insane profits every single year. We're now 15 years into this train, whereas the iPod was pretty much done 11 or 12 years into its existence because the iPhone
Yeah.
essentially was the iPod evolved. It was, well, let's just do the whole phone as well. Why you don't need to have two devices. We'll just do it all one device. And that was, I think, a rare instance of Apple kind of eating their own foot because the iPod was their cash cow by 2007, and they planned its own destruction. It took a couple of years before people, were really on board the iPhone train. Someone I think in the chat earlier said the first like real big iPhone was the 3GS. I think that's a fair statement. I think the iPhone 2G was a little bit niche early adopter. People that were into tech went for it, but I mean, both of our dads still had Blackberries, right?
Yeah.
When did your dad go for the iPhone?
I was trying to remember, but it was not before the iPhone 4 because it wasn't until because we always had Verizon, so it wasn't until the iPhone came to Verizon. And I did get the iPhone 4 when it came to Verizon, and I don't remember if I know he had an iPhone 5. I'm not sure if he had an iPhone 4 or not, but it was a
I
couple
thought he
years
did
after.
because I think I remember when your dad got the 5, and I think he came from a 4.
Then I mean, I honestly don't remember, but he definitely had the 5, and he probably also had the 4.
I mean,
But
didn't
that
you
would have been
guys
the
have
first
like
one.
3 eventually dead iPhone 4s kicking around the house?
There's a bunch of them. I think you know what? Because my sister had an iPhone 4 for some time, and that was either my old
That was a
one or my dad's
hand-me-down.
old one. Yeah, it was someone's
Yeah,
hand me down. I don't remember.
that definitely makes sense. And this comment I think is very accurate here. I don't really see the iPhone as a phone. I see it as a handheld computer that happens to make calls. That's a very good point. I think the iPhone not only evolved the iPod, but it involved the concept of a phone
Hmm.
because I think most people don't really use their iPhones primarily for calls. In 2007, I think people would have been using their iPhone a majority of the time to make calls, and then probably for messaging as well. I think people probably would have been using messaging fairly frequently. Oh, this one's jailbroken, by the way.
Oh, nice. I love the old
Running
jailbroken stuff.
I think we're on iPhone OS. What are we on here? 1.1.4 and jailbroken.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I've got look at all the old. Oh, I got to connect this thing to Wi-Fi for it to work. But yeah, I mean, this is before we even had the ability to swipe left and right and have multiple app pages, and it's jailbroken. That one, oh, it's got a SIM card in it too. I just saw the I think it might even be connected to cellular. It's got bars. What? What's this one on? Oh, here we go. Look at this, folks. This is iPhone OS 1.0. And I mean,
Nice.
this alone, when you talk about 2007, most people were, texting with keypads. Most people had, I mean, phones had cameras at that point, but they weren't like particularly high featured. And to be fair, this one isn't either. Rear facing only, picture, no video. It's not glamorous, but it's certainly better than I think the competition in 2007.
Yeah.
You cannot change this wallpaper. You cannot rearrange apps. You cannot add apps. You cannot move apps. There's no pages. There's no swiping in any direction, up or down or left or right or anything. You open an app, you close an app, and that's it. That's all you got. No multitasking, no anything.
Yep.
But this is where it started. This not only started the smartphone, but I would even argue that this, what I'm holding right here in my hand, was what gave us the internet as we know it today. This is what gave us the ability to access news whenever we want it, the ability to create content whenever we want it. This launched social media. I genuinely believe that social media as we know it would not exist without the iPhone. Yes, you had Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Those had existed before the iPhone came out. But in a desktop form, social media would not be the same in desktop only. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I only have to look at my demographics on YouTube to see that most people are watching on their phones, and YouTube is probably more desktop skewed than, I mean, something like TikTok. TikTok would not exist without an iPhone. It is an entirely smartphone based. It's smartphone bred. Twitter, probably 95% of people are using Twitter on their smartphones. And even legacy stuff like Facebook is almost entirely smartphone now too.
Yeah, I mean, social media as it is today wouldn't be nearly the same without like phones, because when you have like a device on you at all times that you can use to, add content, whether you're taking a picture or a video or posting or like whatever it is, like the fact that it's something that you have on you at all times in your pocket and it's so easy to just whip it out and, do something,
Yeah.
it's definitely a smartphone thing. And then obviously, the iPhone, you can make arguments because, Android was also around at the time, and, you can even talk about Windows Phone and whatever else you want, but like iPhone was a really big like thing for moving, for like introducing smartphones and moving them forward. So like, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. It's really, and I mean, yeah, it's an interesting discussion. I mean, like, let's say in a vacuum, if you could go back in time and create like an experiment, right, where the iPhone never existed, Like Steve Jobs had the idea. Like let's say 2005. Remember the iTunes phone?
The iTunes, was that like the iPod, like with the rotary dial or something? Or is that
So
something else?
Apple partnered with Motorola and they launched a Motorola branded phone that ran iPod software.
I
So
don't
it
know if I
had
remember that.
iTunes, it had iPod software on it. You could sync it with your iTunes on your Mac, but it was a Motorola smartphone. Horrible,
Hmm.
disgusting failure. Nobody bought it. I kind of want to buy one, but if Apple had seen that and said, "Well, that's it. We're not doing phones. We'll do media players." Maybe they still did tablets. Maybe they still did smartwatches, although those kind of spawned out of the iPhone, so that's questionable. But imagine that Steve Jobs never had the idea for the iPhone and said, "We're just going to keep making the best computers." Twofold question for you, Noah, and for chat. Would someone else have invented the modern smartphone and popularized it and ended up with a similar situation that we're in today? And would Apple have essentially faded into obscurity without an iPhone to launch this whole new business segment?
Those are some really interesting questions.
Mm.
I like that. I would have to. So let's see. I don't remember the exact timeline of, because I know Android existed around the time that the original iPhone did. I don't remember if it was shortly before, or shortly after that Android first existed. But even back
Find that out for
then,
you.
yeah, because even back then, I remember my mom, and my mom's in the chat, so I'll say hi, of course. But my mom had the Motorola Razer, and
Yes.
so the Motorola Razer, it was one of the first. Um, or am I thinking of the wrong
Well,
thing?
no,
It
the
was,
Razer. So the Razer came out in 2005. That was the peak of the like pre-smartphone. That was like the flip phone, the iconic flip phone that was sort of like the pinnacle of pre-smartphone phones. The first Android phone was the HTC Dream, which was unveiled in November 2007. Or well, Android was unveiled in November 2007 and the HTC Dream launched in September 2008. So
okay.
Android was afterwards, but I have to imagine that Android was being developed simultaneously. Like I highly doubt that they just saw the iPhone and said, "All right, do this right now."
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The phone, I actually think I made a mistake. The phone that I meant to say was the Droid, the Motorola Droid, and that came
Oh, I
out
remember that one.
That came out in
I remember when she had that.
2009. Yes, that was October 2009. So that was a little bit after, but that was one of the earlier Android phones, and that was
Yeah,
one of the phones that had the flip out keyboard. So you could use it like a smartphone holding in your hand, but you could also turn it on its side and flip up. And it had a keyboard, and it also had a little. It wasn't a trackpad, but it was like a four directional with the button. So it
like a
was
little hat switch.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it had that, and and so to answer your first question, would someone else have come along and done the phones and whatever? I think the answer is yes. But I think maybe it would have taken longer for phones to get to how they are now, because like that when the iPhone took the keyboard away, that was like a big thing, and Steve Jobs made a big deal about that in the keynote, because he was saying like, all these phones have fixed sets of buttons on them. What if you could have,
Mhm.
dynamic buttons that adapt to whatever you're doing? And that was a big deal, and that was like the famous Steve Ballmer quote, right, where he's like, it doesn't even have a keyboard, no one's gonna buy this thing, whatever, whatever.
Yep.
So and then again, you look at the Droid, for example, and that still had a flip out keyboard and whatever. But the iPhone from the very beginning never had a hard keyboard. It was always a software keyboard. And so for something like that, I think it would have taken potentially would have taken longer for smartphones to come out that didn't have, hardware keyboards versus the iPhone just sort of, went out and did it immediately. Just
And
like this
chat
comment
seems to be
says.
backing you up there. For what it's worth, the HTC Dream, the first fully fledged Android phone, also had a slide out keyboard. And I think a lot of phones probably would have continued to have that. I almost wonder indefinitely, because I think the iPhone was a big industry leader in, from the very beginning they said, we're not putting hardware buttons on this. Like, there's on, off, and volume. That's all you get. That's all you need. Or weirdly, they also had mute, which some Android phones still don't have. I don't know why there's still no ringer switch on like all these Android phones. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But all of the early Android phones, nearly, were those slide out. I think they called them candy bar phones
Yeah.
because it was landscape rather than vertical. So clearly, the industry in general was moving towards having some sideways content. You get a wider keyboard, it's more comfortable to type on. And I will point out, though, that now phones have increased in size so much that your portrait mode keyboard is probably bigger than those sliding keyboards were back in 2009 anyway.
I
So it
never
does
liked
make you
those sliding
wonder.
keyboards. Those buttons were always too small on any of those
I
phones.
agree. I agree.
No,
But it
yeah.
did take a while, though, for people to get used to screen typing. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
nowadays we take it for granted. Like, if I were to go back to a candy bar phone, I'd kill myself because it's so slow and you always hit the wrong key. And the buttons are like those tiny little membranes. It's not really a keyboard, it's a keypad with a
Yeah.
QWERTY shape. And it's
Yeah.
not very intuitive. But keep in mind that this was coming out in a time where people were still used to typing on the vertical keypads, which I always forget the name. What are those called?
T9. You're talking
Yes,
about like, yeah,
T9
with just the numbers. Yeah, the T9, yeah.
with just the number. So then you press it 3 times. It's like JKS and then LMN or whatever, and you click a bunch of times over and over again. Like, that was the competition, right? So yeah, the slide out phones were much better than that, and arguably some of the early smartphones with those small 3.5-inch screens were a little tricky to type on in vertical mode. But the inherent benefit that Apple tapped into was that you could make software improve that experience, and that means you could improve it after you shipped it. And that's what Steve Jobs said from the very beginning. You can add features via download instead of via replacement. And as Nathan says here, he does not think the industry was in a hurry to move away from physical keyboards. Absolutely. I mean, before smartphones were dominant, all of the feature phones, remember those that you would get even a couple of years later, like the one that I got in 2010,
Mhm.
phones that they were still selling in 2012 or even 2013, a lot of them were still those slidey keyboard phones. A lot of Android phones were slidey keyboard phones. I don't think the industry would have moved away from those types of keyboards without Apple pushing that and working on that software to make it easier to use. I mean, that's one of the genius things about the keyboard on here. Remember, this is before there was any sort of like AI or machine learning. Everything on here, all these features are hard coded. There's no machine learning going on. But what one of the things that was programmed into this keyboard from the very start is they figured, okay, this is like an inch wide. You're trying to fit a QWERTY keyboard on a very, very small screen. Let me unlock this here and pull up a keyboard to show you just how tiny it is. I'm sure most of you have seen these before, but my goodness, it's tiny. It's minuscule. We'll pull up, look at the skeuomorphism here in the Notes app.
Oh yeah.
My finger is like 3 letters wide. So
Yeah.
how do you do that? How do you make this a usable experience when people are used to buttons, when people are used to sliding keyboards, all of the different ways that smartphone manufacturers came up with. Well, when Apple was testing the iPhone prototypes, when they were developing iPhone OS and the iPhone as a contraption, they had that exact same thought. They were like, how in the world are we going to make this usable? And it turned out that the way to do that was to make the hitboxes for the keys not the size of the keys. So when you're typing any given word, what they did was they figured out, okay, if I type an E, it is likely to be followed by maybe an A. A lot of words have EA. A lot of words have ER. A lot of words have, ES. So the hitboxes for A, R, and S, ears, which I've just spelled unintentionally, those hitboxes were larger. So it was easier to hit them. And so whenever you're actually typing on these phones, and this is still how it works as far as I know, the hitboxes for likely letters are changing sizes. Like when you type a Q on the original iPhone, the hitbox for a U is massive. It's very easy to type QU on the original iPhone. Let me see if I can do it here just for demonstration purposes. Like, even I'm just going to look in the camera here. I'm going to type a Q, and now I'm going to just try to type a U real quick. I missed. Q, U. It's really easy to type QU on this phone because the U hitbox gets larger than the actual key itself. And so that was the way that Apple figured out, okay, we don't need to make the buttons bigger. We need to make the phone smarter. We need to make the buttons know what you want to say.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool way of dealing with it. And like you said, it can get better over time, and they can tweak it and improve it. And they can add features like autocorrect and predictive text and all that stuff over time to make it even better. But I think going back to the keyboard question, and saying how the industry wasn't really looking to get rid of keyboards. First of all, I agree with that, because you can look at the evolution. First there was T9, then there was the Blackberries had the portrait keyboards, like the physical keyboards in portrait mode, and then the candy bar phones where you'd slide it up in landscape. So they were improving on the keyboard tech over time, which to me says that they were still committed to it, and they're still working on it. And I honestly think that if Apple had come along to the smartphone game later, or if some other, I think whenever Apple entered the smartphone game, whenever it was going to be, they wouldn't have had a keyboard, I think. Right, because obviously they didn't have it at the beginning when it was big. If they came in later, they wouldn't have, had a keyboard. But whether it's Apple coming in or some other company, I think they would have gotten the same backlash that Apple gets when they do things like remove the CD drive and remove the headphone jack and all of that stuff. It would have been exactly the same as all of those other things.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I mean, when you look back at the original iPhone, it might have invented a whole lot in these past 15 years, but there were some things that they just, we think of it as revolutionary, but there were some things that they just completely bungled. Like, this design is iconic now, but it's a product of compromise. Johnny Ive wanted the whole thing to be aluminum, and then they said, hey, buddy, how are we going to get a phone signal through that if it's a solid lump of metal? So you end up with this black stripe on the bottom that they did not want there. Make no mistake, they did not want that on the bottom of this thing. And then they, the year after that, they went to plastic all over, because then it's a uniform, but then it's also a plastic phone. And this is Apple, and they don't like that.
Yeah.
And so then they moved into what I think are the two most successful designs, the 4 and the 4S and the 5.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic designs where you have bands in the side integrated, but not, like this. There's also the matter of the headphone jack being on the top. It was there for 5 years, before they realized that that's dumb, and everyone puts it in to their pocket like this, and the headphone jack was getting smushed and went around the side. That took them 4 years to figure out. Not to mention the fact that the headphone jack on the original iPhone is recessed really, really far into the phone. So almost any pair of headphones, almost anything with a headphone jack does not plug into this because it doesn't fit in that socket. I mean, it's Steve Jobs didn't even think that an app store would be a good idea. Like they didn't nail it right away. I think that's important to keep in mind. Like they started it here. This is where the modern smartphone began, but they didn't do it all at once. No company ever does it all at once.
Yeah, it definitely took them some time. And yeah, I think like the App Store is definitely the biggest thing because in the early days of the iPhone, Steve Jobs believed that like websites and like, mobile optimized websites were going to be the thing. And he didn't want the App Store. He didn't want Flash, which turned out, obviously to be a good thing. And there was a whole thing about Flash, but that was a little bit later on. But like the App Store, that came in iPhone OS 2, right? So that was not too far after.
I think so.
Yeah,
or maybe 3.
I think it was iPhone OS 2 or 2 point something.
You're right. July 10th, 2008 was the official launch of the App Store. Yeah, so it took a year for the App Store. iTunes came shortly thereafter because I mean iTunes didn't ship initially. If I pull up this this jailbroken phone here that's on 1.1. Let's see, did 1.1 have iTunes? Yes, it did. But on iPhone OS 1.0, you didn't have iTunes on here. Look, there's no iTunes app.
Yeah.
So that took a little while. There was iPod, so it was just like an iPod built into it, but then iTunes came out with 1.1, which was 2 or 3 months after launch, I think. But yeah, I mean, they definitely didn't get it right away. Apple never does. Remember Apple Maps 2012?
Apple Watch. There's a lot of things that you can point to. But the important thing is they eventually did get it right. Yeah, almost everything. But they did, because like if you think about it, there's a lot. Like imagine if they never introduced the App Store. Imagine like if you think about any time you've had to use like a mobile website for something, it's so like the experience is so much worse than a native mobile app, and it's so much more limited in terms of its functionality. What hardware it can access, what information it can access. Like imagine if Apple had stuck with that and they didn't do it, or they took even longer to launch the App Store, because that was a huge thing for Apple. Like the App Store was a huge thing for the iPhone, and if they had delayed on that or not done it, like imagine how different things would be.
I do also have to wonder though, would it, like, say the App Store never existed and we ended up stuck with you can't download apps, you can just go to websites like Steve Jobs originally wanted. Do you not think that websites would have just evolved to be as easy to use? Because like websites have already come a long way since, remember back in the early iOS days when you would like websites would have a specific mobile website, like you'd have to develop 2 separate websites. Now it's, they look at the aspect ratio and the width of the display and it just automatically adjusts the same website. I mean, if you're on your computer right now, go to apple.com in a window and make the window narrower and narrower. Once you get to a certain point, it's going to snap and become the mobile version, essentially, because websites are just intelligent now, and they weren't like that 10 years ago. So do you not think that maybe rather than the mess of ads and crappy like bloat that websites on mobile tend to be now, maybe they would have been developed for a web-based ecosystem?
I think that that's a good question, because I think that apps could, or like mobile websites Like if you yeah, I mean, if you look at mobile websites, you can do a lot on them. Like if you go to, Twitter or Facebook or like, even I don't know about TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but like I know they have like a web version too. Like any of the things that you go
Yeah.
to on the web, you can do a lot of the same things. There's a lot of things that you can't do, like certain parts of the device or certain things that you
Yeah.
can access. And maybe Apple would have opened that up more to the web, or maybe there would have been more open standards because if there's not native apps, then there would have been more reason for that to be available on the web. But I don't know. It's I feel like they're just kind
Mhm.
of different. Like the mobile, like think about games, for example. Are you like the kind of games that you can run on a mobile device? If that were on the web, would that be a good experience with like the loading and downloading and like execution? Like there's just a lot of things there.
Now, here's an interesting, as we're wrapping up here, Carl in chat has asked us to speculate on where the iPhone will be 10 years from now. And I think that's an interesting question because when you look at the iPhone 10 years ago, that's the iPhone 5. And to be honest, I don't think we're radically all that different now than we were 10 years ago. Like the basic ingredients of an iPhone are still here.
Yeah.
Still using the same charging interface, the lightning port.
Yeah.
um, or still using, portrait oriented designs. We're still using, front and rear facing cameras. And I think a lot of the additions to the phone have been pretty logical, like answering questions, answering demands that I think people had. People were like, we want a bigger screen. We got bigger screens. Oh, I want more options. Oh, we have more options. I want to be able to charge without plugging it in. Good, got it. I want to be able to unlock it by looking at it. Sure, there you go. Um, Software features, similar path, more integration, um, more cross compatibility, adding other accessories, watches, iPads, working together in the ecosystem and developing that. But when you look at it, realistically, I don't think the iPhone as a hardware package has changed a ton in the past 10 years. So, 10 years from now, I think you have to think about it logically. What are the issues with smartphones now? What are the things that bother us when we use a phone? What are the limitations? I kind of wonder if the big one is size.
Mm.
I think we are like the iPhone obviously has grown quite a bit since it originally came out because in
Yes.
2007 it was all about small, get it into a small package. But then we kind of said, I don't really care about small that much, really. And now we have this, which is like the size of my entire head.
Yeah.
But I think we've reached a limit here. If Apple made a phone any bigger than this, I'd be like, no, that's too much. That's too big of a phone. The iPhone 13, which is actually about the same footprint as the the 6 Plus and the 6S Plus and the 7 Plus and the 8 Plus and the 10S Max and the 11 Pro Max and the 12 Pro Max. They're all around the same size because I think that's basically the largest that people are comfortable having a phone, and even that is too big for some people. But everyone wants a bigger screen. So I personally think that the trend in the next 10 years is how do you get a larger screen on a smaller phone? Expandable screens, I think, are what's next. I don't know if that's foldable. I don't know if that's augmented reality. I don't know if that's, you know, phones that become wider that have like extendy bits on the outside of them. I don't know if it's a simple solution or a complex one, but to me, I think that is the direction that we're going. People want to have a small phone again, but they don't want to give up a big screen. And the technology industry has to figure out how you do that. What do you think, Noah?
I think that's first of all, I think that's a good point. And definitely if you look at the industry, not Apple necessarily, but the industry as a whole, like the foldable phones and all of that have been like a big thing that like all the companies are working on and showing off and doing. I mean, you can argue about how good those phones are because a lot of them are pretty thick and the hinges have problems, whatever, but like there's a lot of investment going on in there. So that
Yeah.
definitely means that there's a demand for it, and there's a reason why they're doing it. So first of all, I definitely agree about the people want to have more screen real estate in but they don't want their phones to get much bigger, obviously. So that's the
Yeah.
first thing. And then I'll say for my thing, or for what I think for the next 10 years, I guess. So if you look at like the iPhone 2G compared to the iPhone 5, because we're using the iPhone 5 that was 10 years ago from us. So compared to the 2G, those phones, like the difference there is a lot more than the difference between the 5 and the 13 that we have today. Because like
So
if
the
you take
first
the
5 years had a lot more
Mhm.
change than the next 10 years, you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Because like if you look at the original 2G, it didn't have the App Store. It didn't have a lot. It didn't have a lot. It didn't have multitasking. It didn't have cut and paste. It didn't have. There were like all of these things. It was like a very, very, very basic phone. And you can argue about when Apple got to sort of the minimum viable product phase. Maybe that was the 3GS. Maybe that was the 4. But the first couple of iPhones, it didn't have video recording. There were so many things. Didn't have a front-facing camera. I could keep thinking of things that the original iPhone or original iPhones didn't have. So the first 5 years was like getting to the point, where they have all of the ingredients, like you said, they had all of the things that you need to have in a phone. And then from the 5 on, the real thing was about making it more powerful so that you could do, more things on it. Like, if you look at TikTok and all those, video apps, like you can record and edit videos on the phone itself, which, if
Mhm.
you look back at the iPhone 5, I'm not sure how good of an experience that would have been given the processing power and the
Probably
screen size
not.
and all that. Probably not too great. So, so from the 5 on, or whatever you want to say, but for the past 10 years at least, it's been really about making the phones more powerful and more capable of being able to do things. And so there was the comment before about how someone said they think of a phone as like a computer that can make calls, or I forget what the exact comment was, but that's basically what it's been for the past 10 years is making it more powerful. It's catching up to what a computer can do, exceeding it in some places and not in other places where it makes sense. But I think that's the trend that's going to continue, because like we have what we need for a smartphone. Like I don't think there's anything fundamental that's really missing at this point. So it's just,
Yeah.
continuing to be it's going to be, faster, it's going to be more powerful, it's going to be more intelligent so that it can figure out what you want to do and help you do what you want to do. So I think that's the trajectory that we've seen, and I think it's going to continue at that point, because that's the difference between the 5 and the 13, other than the size and all that stuff, is that it's gotten more powerful and more capable and more intelligent. And I think that's what's
Yeah.
going to continue on. So that's my thought.
And I don't think that necessarily has to be a hardware thing. What you're talking about is software.
Yeah.
I mean, faster chips, yes, but software. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think
both,
that's an
but a lot of
interesting
software.
point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, here, I'm looking through the chat here, and I see a lot of people, wondering about the necessity of larger phones. It seems like I'm seeing a lot of sentiment for, I want a phone to be pocketable and small. But you can't deny that having a larger screen is generally preferred. People want larger TVs, larger laptops, larger desktops. A larger screen is just considered better in many cases.
And they're not
Um,
saying that they want a smaller screen. They're not saying that they want a small screen. They're saying they want a phone that fits in their pocket, right? That's
exactly.
the
They're
key.
not saying I want to have less content on my screen. I want to squint more. I want to have a harder keyboard to type on. They're saying I want the device, the physical device, to be smaller.
Right.
And so that's why I was saying, like, I don't know. I really think that in a way, those old Android phones from 10 years ago were onto something, because those were devices that were compact and expanded.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it wasn't additional displays, it wasn't a foldable thing like we have now, but it was some sort of expansion of the phone. You'd slide it out so you continue to have your screen and you have an additional keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
My mom had this Samsung flip phone that had an e-ink keypad.
Really?
This is like circa 2009. So you would flip it vertically, no touchscreen, by the way. You'd flip it vertically, and it had like a numeric keypad with additional functional buttons. You could close it. You could then flip it horizontally and have a keyboard, because the buttons could change. So like the buttons were there, but what they did was movable.
Mm-hmm.
And it does make you wonder, maybe, we like to think of Apple as having invented the modern smartphone, but maybe Android phone makers, candy bar phone makers, flip phone makers from 15 to 20 years ago, maybe they were right all along in terms of having a device that's first job is to be small, and then to figure out how to expand once you're using it.
That's, I never thought about it, but that's a good point. I like that.
I mean, you look at what was that one, the LG Wing.
Oh yeah,
Do you see the LG Wing?
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea. I mean, right now, the Galaxy Fold, the Z Flip, the LG Wing, these are niche products. These aren't, broadly out there. People aren't
Mm-hmm.
really doing that. But the iPhone was a niche enthusiast product when it launched in 2007.
Yeah.
The industry is much more entrenched now. It's much more of a machine than an experiment, which it certainly was. 15 years ago, all of the phone makers, think how many form factors there were for phones 15 years ago. Everyone was just experimenting with whatever wacky shapes they could come up with.
Yeah.
Now it's, what color rectangle do you want? Do you want medium rectangle or giant rectangle?
Pretty much. We're getting a little bit of that back with the foldables and the crazy concepts, but
Exactly.
yes, it's just starting to come back now.
And it does make you wonder where we're going to go next. But you know where we're going to go next, Noah?
I think I do.
Yes, we are going to go to the wrapping up portion of the podcast.
Oh boy, let's head on over there.
Yeah, join me. Here we go. We're here now in the wrapping up portion of the podcast. Did you hear like wind rushing over the microphone there by any chance?
Not really, but
Dang
we'll pretend that happened.
We'll pretend that happened. Anyway, we didn't get to talking about automotive stuff. We can do that next week.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no news. Let's talk about it next week.
Yeah.
So if you guys come here for Apple stuff, guess what? Next time we're going to talk about car stuff. We'll relate it to Apple somehow, I'm sure. We always do.
Yeah.
Through metaphor and analogy. But next week, we're talking cars. We're talking EVs. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But as for today, I have been your host, Luke Miani.
And I've been your host, Noah Rubin. Thanks for joining us, and have a good night.
Take care.